everybody. So the North American beaver is the largest rodent in the United States, growing from 2 to 3 feet long, not including the tail, and can weigh as much as 60 pounds. And they are super cute. In fact, there's even a beaver from a wildlife rehabilitation named Justin Beaver. And as you can see, he's got great table manners. If you want to see more about Justin Beaver, just YouTube him. Oops. Beaver have waterproof fur and webbed feet. When they're underwater, its nose and ears close up, and a special membrane covers its eyes, which are all features that make them great semi-aquatic dwellers. A flat, broad, and scaly tail around a foot long is used for balance, swimming, and creating noise to alarm others of approaching predators. Beavers are semi-aquatic herbivores. They travel from land to collect and eat sticks and trees. They're actually eating the living layer under the bark, which is called the cambium, as you can see here in the green. And they also eat leaves, roots, and wetland plants. Like all rodents, beaver teeth grow continuously throughout their lives, so they must gnaw on trees and keep those teeth from getting too long. The thick layers of enamel on the outside of their front teeth give them an orange color. And as you can see here on Castor, he's got some orange teeth. So as you can see, they'll also use these trees and branches to build both their dam and lodge. And they will get into their living chambers from an underwater entrance. They'll also take sticks and vegetation and create a food cache or a semi-submerged food pile that will get them through the winter. I'm sure somewhere out there somebody has figured out how to get a camera in there to see. That is something maybe I'll look up after this, because that would be pretty cool to see what it looks like down there. All right, so here's a little video from one of our restoration sites. So beavers are considered ecosystem engineers because they build dams to retain water. They're also considered a keystone species. This means that their presence in nature greatly affects other wildlife. In fact, the removal of beavers from their natural setting leads to a decrease in habitat quality. They build dams, and in turn, that creates wetlands, which many species depend on, and it plays a crucial role in biodiversity. So as you can see in this video, removing a beaver dam just makes them work harder. So this landowner, you might have had this problem yourself. Maybe it's flooding out your area, so you take the dam down, or they go back in overnight and they're busy and they fix it. But as you can see, it left behind a great habitat. And here are some wood ducks, which I don't see super often. They are around here, but it's always a special treat to see them. So you can see that their engineering creates great habitat, and it's going to improve that habitat. All right. So just taking it back a little bit, beaver populations prior to European colonization were estimated to be up to 400 million. That is a ton of beavers. Historically, they dominated the pre-colonial North American landscape, occupying wetland and riparian areas. Centuries of trapping and the pelt trade resulted in the near extirpation of the North American beaver. Though trapping, hunting, and pelt trades are still legal, the activity has significantly decreased. I'm sure, many of us aren't going around wearing furs these days or can afford a beaver pelt hat. So fashion has changed. We're using cotton and other man-made materials to create clothes instead of pelts. So it has allowed beaver population to make a comeback. And as you can see, they're now once again found in almost all of North America, which is great. So with more beaver come more human-beaver interaction issues. So beaver activity on private and public property can become a nuisance by impacting agricultural activities, access, and properties. So often when you hear about folks having beaver on their properties, it's often in a negative sense because it's something that affects the humans. So you can see that their activity can flood roadways and public areas. You guys might deal with a lot of this down there. It can impact infrastructure, which will also impact the roadways. And impact valuable vegetation, or in this case, what looks like a stream down the middle is actually a public trail. In addition to these issues, tree damage is often seen as a nuisance by many people. Maybe it's your favorite tree, or those weeping willows that you were telling me about earlier, Brian, that the beavers took a liking to. You know, so there's many reasons why people get concerned when there are beavers around. So this might be why some of you tuned in tonight, but if you are having some damage on the trees on your property or nearby, there are some solutions that you could try to help save some of those trees from damage or further damage. You know, this is a natural process. The beaver are still going to find some trees, even if it's not their favorite ones, if you fence off every tree. But, you know, maybe you have some large trees that you really want to save. So as you can see, I left the link up there, but the Beaver Institute is a really great resource for how-tos on management, a little more about beavers, some DIY stuff that you can do. So I highly recommend visiting their website. So you can put wire fencing around the base of the trunk, and that will deter them. You can also try sand paint tree protection. I'd be interested if anybody here has tried that. I know I've heard of it, but I don't really know of any projects up here where that's been tried. Usually the wire fencing is the go-to. So in this case, you're mixing an exterior latex paint with sand, and then you're painting it on the tree. And obviously you want to try to match the bark color so it looks natural. And once again, the Beaver Institute does have some tutorials on these things. Another thing that you could do is plant some food for the beavers. You know, maybe if you plant some of their favorite foods, they'll leave some of your ornamental trees or whatever you're trying to save alone. You know, they prefer, and these are species all over the states, so I didn't quite narrow it down, but their favorites include willows, which we have several species out here that they really like, alders, aspens, apple, birch, cherry, cottonwood, and poplar. So apparently their favorites are aspen, poplar, and willow. And we plant a lot of willows out here for beavers. So if the supply of their preferred tree is low, they will harvest some less delectable trees. You could also plant some more wetland vegetation that they might take a liking to. But just to note that a lot of species like willow will actually regenerate after beaver herbivory. So some of these plants, you know, they've evolved with the beaver to coexist. So some of their favorite food supplies like willows will come back after some time. So that's something to consider. All right, so what do you do if a beaver moves into your property, your community, or your restoration site? In our case up here at Ecotone. So I'm sure many of us have had this happen, whether you're happy about them being there or maybe not happy. Something that Ecotone has been exploring over the past several years is how can we use some alternative solutions to manage beaver to promote coexistence with humans instead of taking lethal action, which is very common. And just a note, in case you weren't aware, relocating beaver in Maryland is illegal. So you would not be able to trap and relocate. All right, so a little science here because I work for a restoration firm. So why should we keep beaver around? This image basically is just showing you progression of how beaver dams can naturally restore stream ecosystems. So in the first figure, you can see beavers came in, they built some dams. Over time, it's going to change that landscape until eventually you're getting a stream wetland complex with diverse plantings all around it. You see more trees, you're going to see more wildlife. Once again, this goes back to them being that ecosystem engineer, where they're doing things that humans are trying to do in our restoration world of creating a more well-rounded ecosystem where we're going to have not a stream that is a single channel and incised, which a lot of us see on our properties, but after the beaver come in and build their dams, wetlands are happening, and then the stream will be multi-threaded. So here's an interesting side-by-side comparison in Utah, and you can see on the left, my left, also your left, right here is a more complex stream wetland system versus on the right is another section further down where there are no beaver. You can see it's heavily grazed maybe by cattle, but if I were a wild animal, I think I would probably rather live in the portion where the beaver is because there's just so much more diversity. So there's more plants, there's more wildlife. So they've just naturally done this, which is pretty awesome. So here's one of our restoration sites up here in Harford County. So it doesn't look too bad, right? But if you look out in the water, you might see some tree tubes, which means that there were trees planted there. So this site was actually a reforestation area, which means it was grass, and we planted a bunch of trees here. So the beaver must have thought this was a great place to move in, and they built some dams and then flooded out our reforestation area. So if we don't manage the water levels, the landowners' roads and fields will be flooded next, which is an issue for a large agricultural area that this was. So what can we do? So we've learned from our friends at Beaver Solutions that if you can control the water level, you eliminate the need to remove the beaver. So a lot of people who have the beaver moved in and they're building the dams, the biggest issue is them flooding out their area, whether it's your driveway or your agricultural fields, etc. You know, so how can we keep that from happening? So we partnered with Beaver Institute to utilize this very simple and affordable flexible pond leveler, which we call Beaver Flow Management Devices. It's a mouthful. And so this helps us to manage the water levels by creating a permanent leak through the dam. And that is going to keep the beaver from moving back in and constantly, sorry, I'm reading the comments. So that's keeping the beaver from knowing that there's a hole in their dam because it's going underneath the water. So they're not hearing that leak and they don't go in there and constantly repair it. So this is another great website if you're looking to learn a little more, Beaver Solutions, and they also have some DIY resources. All right, so remember that video I showed you earlier of the beavers who were repairing their dam overnight and then the wood ducks moved in? This is the same dam, the same property, and the landowner for years has been removing the beaver dams, and they have even taken some lethal methods, but it must be one heck of a place to move into if you're a beaver, because they just keep coming back. So they finally reached wit's end. They're like, I just don't know what to do. Can you help us? So we installed a beaver flow management device through this dam to control the water levels. So in 2018, we held a workshop with the Beaver Solutions, showing others how to build these very simple devices. And this is Mike Callahan. He runs that company. So it's pretty simple, some super heavy wire. You roll up and you're creating this cylindrical shape that's covered on top. Now you can see the device is fully constructed, and the size of the pipe is based on the drainage area. So every device is actually site specific to the Beaver Dam and the drainage area of the site. So we got our team out there in their waders, and they were securing the device with some fancy cinder blocks, keep it from floating away. And then they perforated the pipe to allow water to flow. Otherwise, it would just float up. And then you can see they put it through the dam, so they had to break the dam open a little bit to bury it under. And that is the finished product. So it is going through the dam, and the beavers will hear that water coming out, and they'll think, you know, why is this happening? There's a leak in the dam, but they can't find where that leak is, because as far as they can tell, the dam is still intact. So this is also something that we have installed for culverts, where beavers have moved in and clogged up the culvert, which is pretty common. So here you can see that they've caused this road to flood from clogging this culvert. And so we had to devise a unique one where the fencing protecting the culvert is large and wide enough that if the beaver still tried to dam it up, they would eventually give up, because if they had to dam up the entire area around this fencing, it's just too much surface area. So you can see that the finished product was successful. This was about a year later, and if you have any issues on your local infrastructure that you've noticed, certainly reach out to us. This is something that we do all the time, and would work with the local department to install. And you can actually see along the fence that looks like maybe that beaver started trying to dam it up and just kind of gave up because they realized it was just too big. So just quickly, I just wanted to touch on some of the design techniques that we have been looking into to attract beaver. And the technique that we've been exploring is called Beaver Dam Analogs, or BDAs. This is something that's gained popularity on the West Coast, and something we've actually been working with Maryland Department of Natural Resources to get approval to use in some projects out here in Maryland. So just coming back to that image from earlier, you can see how the beaver can naturally restore an incised stream in a relatively short period of time. So they accelerate the process and create valuable systems and habitat. So why not try to use beaver in our restoration? So this was something that folks out in Oregon have been doing. They did a 10-year study, and they were trying to use beaver to their natural processes to restore streams out there. So unlike on the East Coast, they don't have enough sediment in their streams, whereas you probably know out here we have too much sediment. So in this case, the goal was actually to direct the flows of the stream into the hillside to get some of that sediment into the stream. And that would widen the floodplain, create more of a stream wetland complex. And so they thought if we could mimic a beaver dam and build one ourselves, then maybe this will help speed up that process. So that's where these beaver dam analogs, or BDAs, come into play. So, you know, they pretended like they were beavers and they got out there and tried their best to build a dam. And so they're man-made structures using posts and young flexible trees and shrubs, particularly willows. And so you can either put those posts in the stream with a hydraulic tool, otherwise you can dig by hand. So the idea is to create these beaver dam analogs or mimic a beaver dam. And this is a super low impact and low cost structure, hoping to accelerate the natural process of creating that stream wetland complex. So as I mentioned earlier, you can't relocate beaver here in Maryland. So out here in Oregon, they were able to actually bring in beaver, which helped to also speed up this process. But if you build these structures, you can hope that maybe there are beaver nearby and they would move in. So here are some other examples of a site in California where our CEO went out and helped to build and learn how to create these. So this restoration technique is gaining popularity. We're just trying to get it out on the East Coast. So here's just another model just showing you how these BDAs could help to restore an incised stream to a stream wetland complex in an accelerated time, just like the beavers. And hopefully they will attract those beavers to come in. Oops. All right, so you know, here at Ecotone, we are trying our best to do some stream restoration design to encourage and manage beaver colonization. So something we do in a lot of our designs is leaving some oxbow wetlands, which is where the stream meanders during a storm event, and they will create just kind of like a tiny little wetland pocket. So we leave those because that's great habitat. And it also helps to filter out some of the water during flood events. We also plant regenerative tree species like willows so that if there are beaver in the area, that they'll have a food source that will come back naturally. We promote the stream wetland or valley-wide restoration approach, and we are working on trying to get BDAs approved. We like to do landowner education like this to teach people more about beavers and why they can be an asset to have around. And then also those beaver flow management devices are something that we've been installing more of and have seen, you know, people have an interest in, you know, how can we coexist with this beaver? So you might be finding yourself asking, you know, why should we encourage beaver in the Severn River watershed? It sounds to me like, you know, the Severn River Association and some other local organizations, you all are doing amazing things to promote human and nature coexisting. You're doing some amazing programs, bringing oysters back and just really working with the community and folks like yourselves who are interested in restoring the environment. So that's something that we're trying to do up here as well, and you know, many people are. So you know, encouraging beaver in your watershed, it just sounds like a natural fit with a lot of the things that your organization and the community are interested in. So by creating new habitat, more diverse wildlife will move in. So maybe you'll see more waterfowl come in, maybe you'll see more insects. Flood mitigation, so ponds and floodplain reconnection help store and dissipate flood flows. So these environments that the beaver can create, this stream wetland complex, that actually really helps take some of that sediment that would naturally go downstream during flood events or into your yard and eventually the Chesapeake Bay. These habitats actually help to filter some of that runoff and the sediment especially. Increased habitat, there's reconnection to the floodplain and more accessible habitat than in a single channel, and increased biodiversity, like I mentioned. So their habitat that they create is so important for other species. And like I said, sediment and nutrient reduction. All right, so I think we've got a few minutes for questions, Brian, or if you're.
So I saw you said you peeked at the
Oh
question.
yeah, it caught my eye out of the corner.
Yeah.
Let me see.
I mean, there's just a couple there, so feel free to answer those, and then I have one as well.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so Suzanne asked, why do beaver build dens along lakes? She lives on Lake Ogleton in Annapolis, and there's some natural wetland, but no moving water like a stream. So that is a great question because typically when they're building these dams, they are looking for that moving water. That's what they're trying to cover up. But I have noticed at one of my previous jobs, we had a quarry pond, and every now and then we would have a beaver move in, maybe like in the early spring, and would build a dam on the edge of that quarry pond, but then would move out pretty quickly after that. And I'm not sure if the beaver that you've seen doing that along the lake has done the same thing. But my best guess, which is not a complete answer, but as a scientist, I would say that maybe it seems like prime habitat. Maybe there's not a lot of habitat nearby, and they might move in and then find out that it's, there aren't any other beaver, or maybe it's not the optimal habitat. And maybe, I can look into this some more, but I would say it might just be because there's habitat available and there's food nearby. I've definitely seen them not on streams and rivers as well. Let's see.
Elvia wants to know why it's illegal to relocate them.
So every state has different laws and legislation. In Maryland, it is illegal. Claudia, are you here? Claudia from DNR, I'm not sure if she was able to get on, but our friend from Department of Natural Resources could probably have a more solid answer for that than me. I would just say that it's different depending on every state to relocate them, and maybe because you might not put them in the right spot. I don't have an actual answer for why in Maryland it's illegal. So I'm sorry, Elvia.
Anastasia wants to know, what is the social structure of beaver groups? How many beaver might be born to one female in a year? Do they live in families? Are mates transitory or lifetime?
All right, this is really going back to my knowledge that I didn't brush up on. So I'd have to look up how many kits they have in a year, but I want to say it's a few. It's not as many as some of the other mammals, like an opossum who would have 12. As you can imagine, it must be difficult to take care of semi-aquatic babies if you have a lot of them, like ducks do. They do live in families. They do have their young in the winter months, and then the beavers, as they get a little older, I think the males, maybe near their first year of life, do move off and have to find their own territory. But like I said, this is really reaching back. So I'm happy to answer these in more detail later on. I will provide my email after this, and I can definitely do some more research. I'd be happy to do that for you.
Lynn wants to know, is there a stream that's too small or too large? Like, is there a sweet spot that they go in to set up? What brings them to a body of water?
I would say it's probably dependent on the resources available. So, if you have a trickling small stream, maybe that's intermittent and not always flowing, that would not be something um, ideal for a beaver. But as you can see in some of those photos from out west, they will move into pretty large waters. Um, so I don't think that it's a very, constant type of stream that they're looking for. I think it depends on the resources as a whole. Are there other colonies nearby? Are there mates available? If it's a male trying to find his own territory, are there food nearby? But we see them in pretty urban areas too. So I think it just depends on, what's available and if there's enough for them to want to stay.
Question that I had. You said beavers like willows. Do they have a favorite type of like hardwood versus softwood, or, and where I'm going with that is, do they have species that they avoid for whatever reason? I.e., can people that live in beaver country plant trees on their property, like you have deer resistant plants? Are there?
I think they really don't go towards pines, which, aren't the ones that we mostly want to plant, but I would assume probably that sap in the pine trees and other evergreens probably aren't that delectable. Um, I think they probably like the willows and trees like that because they are, I would assume they're supple. Haven't tried any myself, but maybe because they tend to grow along the water, maybe the taste is different. I'm not totally sure. I also do know that they do not like um, black walnut. And I think that's because there are tannins in the, if you take the actual walnuts, you can create black dye from them. But also, I think that the tree itself would taste like the tannins that are in it. So if you want a lot of black walnut nearby, I don't think they would touch those.
Okay. Where was this other question? Ted wanted to know, do you guys, oh, it's moving on me as they come up. Shoot, it just.
Oh, Ted, does the state of Maryland ever look to groups like yours to cohabitate with beavers? What's the state's approach when beavers are causing road flooding? So we have worked with local governments, as you could see in that infrastructure. That was with a county DPW. And so I think it definitely depends on the organization itself. This is something that we would love for more, at a state level to be accepted. We do have some folks at DNR that we work with that are totally on board for this, that we're trying to work with to get like the Beaver Dam analogs approved. But I would say it depends on the view of each like county Department of Public Works and stuff. So certainly share it with your local officials and Department of Public Works. We'd love to come and help if there's been any beaver issues.
And then Wally wanted to know is if he lives on an island, is there a risk of beavers swarming and surrounding and invading said island?
I guess it depends if that zombie beaver apocalypse is going to happen.
What else was there? What other animals cohabitate with them?
So if you think about animals that you would typically find in streams and wetlands, muskrat live nearby. Up here, we've also seen river otter, and so other semi-aquatic and aquatic mammals seem to coexist very well. A lot of birds and fish and other land mammals, they all the more habitat that is diverse created by these stream wetland complex, the more animals that you'll see.
Excellent.